recording. I'm asking him to yes.
Yep.
Hi guys, this is Shruti here from Dialogues. We're here today for another session of Dialogues That Matter. If you guys have been following us, you know that Dialogues That Matter is a series of interviews that we started where we want to talk to different change makers and people who are doing stellar work in their own field. In the month of June, we kind of spoke to a lot of people from the environment sector, and the previous interview was about the pride and the LGBTQ community. This month, we want to focus our attention and kind of break the silence around the conversations that go around mental health. And for the same, we have with us today Chaitra. Hi, Chaitra. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi,
Um,
Shruti.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
joining
me
us.
here.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. Allow me to introduce Chaitra. This is Chaitra Mahesh, who's a psychologist. She practices counseling as well as psychotherapy. She has a successful venture that's known as Untangle, where she kind of gives therapy and counseling to a lot of people. And she has around 8 years of experience in this field. And today we are just excited to kind of get this conversation going and to understand what are the myths around mental health, and also understand what are the biases and the myths that we have as individuals and as a society. Let's just get directly to it. What I want to understand at the very beginning is, what is mental health, and how is mental health kind of related to physical health, if at all it is?
Mm, sure. So, yes, I think mental health is about how I'm feeling internally, right? So it's about my emotions, it's about my mood, it's about my attitude, my personality. And
Right.
this sort of, you know, is my overall experience of life because my mental health sort of determines my experience of life. So, to a large extent, yes. So that's what we like to call mental health. And
Right.
I think mental health and physical health has a very very close correlation because I think all of us at a very basic level would have experienced this that if I'm not feeling well, even if I might have a fever or a cold or a cough,
Right.
it's very common that I will notice my moods to be dipping in that moment.
Right.
Yeah, so it's something that we are very attuned to.
Right.
And usually also what we see is someone who's doing regular exercise, who's eating a balanced diet, right?
Right.
All of this affects my mood, it affects how I'm feeling. So it's possible and it's scientifically proven that with disorders like anxiety or with depression, people are able to reduce that and also sort of overcome that with
Right.
regular exercise. So it's
Right.
not just about counseling or it's not just about medication, but sometimes exercise is an equally effective option as well.
Right. Right. I think that kind of sets the tone of the conversations that we're going to have further, because, like you said, it's a combination of both the physical and the mental, and how when they come together, you can have a peaceful state of mind, for the lack of a better word. So now this is 2020, and today, like, thankfully, at least compared to before, there's a lot of conversations going around mental health. But let's say around 8 to 10 years ago, there was not as much conversations or even awareness that was going on around mental health, right? So what I want to know is why and when did you kind of realize that you want to do something in the mental health sector, and how did that kind of pique your interest? If you could tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I think in a sense that's so right because when I look back, I graduated in 2012, and before that I did my bachelor's in 2009. So
Right.
back then, I think even the term mental health was not, people were not aware.
Right.
It was not spoken about. Psychotherapy was probably a completely unknown word.
Right.
But there's been a huge shift today.
Right.
Uh, but in terms of my own journey, I think I got into this field more from a process of elimination. Because I was
Okay.
sure that I didn't want to be an engineer, or
Okay.
I didn't want to be in that. In the medicine and the engineering field. So then I
Right.
explored psychology because I'd read about it as the science of the mind, and that sounded really so interesting.
Okay.
So I was curious, and also I think my family is especially my dad, I think he sort of is someone who likes to read a lot of self-help books. So in my house
Okay.
there was a lot of books around positive attitudes or related to the mind.
Right.
And I was a voracious reader, so I used to pick that up, and that sort of also made me curious and interested.
Right.
So when I did my master's in counseling, that's when I think I really felt like this is the place for me. It just felt like the right fit.
Right.
And many times when I think about it, I feel like I've stumbled into the right profession. It
Right.
wasn't something, unfortunately, that I planned it, but I didn't realize that it's such a beautiful fit till I did my
Correct.
master's.
Right. I think I completely understand what you're saying, because for me as well, like life has been similar. Like everything that I've done, I've kind of stumbled upon, but I'm glad that something that you stumbled upon is something that you're doing really well in, and it's something that you kind of feel passionately about as well. What I want to ask is, when we talk about mental health, right, there are a lot of terms that we kind of hear, a lot of different kinds of connotations, terms, vocabulary that are kind of thrown to us. And as a layman, or even as somebody who has interest, it kind of scares you off, because there are so many terms, so many things associated. And secondly, if you could kind of help us distinguish what are these different terms. So I can name a few and you can perhaps add in yourself. So there's therapy, there is counseling, there's psychotherapy, there's psychiatry. What like There's so much. Like, I'm just naming a few, right? There's just essentially so much. If you talk to us about the basic divisions and how they're kind of essentially different, so that we can kind of understand what is the differences.
Right. Yes, I think this is very important.
Right.
And it's very common that we get confused about these terms.
Right.
So psychiatry is basically it's medicine, right? So a
Right.
psychiatrist is someone who's done their MBBS and then
Right.
they've done an MD in psychiatry.
Correct.
So these are doctors who would be consulting from a hospital or their own private clinics, and
Okay.
they will give you medication for mental disorders.
Correct.
Yeah, so if you want medication for, let's say, depression or for sleeping, right, for or
Mhm.
any other disorder, then you go to a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Yeah, a counselor is someone who's trained in counseling skills.
Okay.
Right, so I think right now in India also, because of lack of regulations and lack of licensing also, there is people with different skills and people with different qualifications can call themselves counselors. So I
Okay.
think it's important to sort of look at what type of counselor are you looking for, or the person that you are interacting with is.
Okay.
So a counselor generally, in a very basic level, I think it's someone who might have done a certificate course,
Okay.
a diploma in
Okay.
counseling skills. So
Okay.
it's good that you could go to them if you do not have any particular difficulty as such, but you're just looking at someone who would hear you out, provide you a lot of empathy,
Got it.
right? Where you just need that kind of space, but not
Right.
if you're going through any severe distress or there is some mental health issue as such.
Right.
Yeah, a psychologist is anyone who's studied a psychology degree, so at least a master's.
Right.
And psychology can be in different fields. So counseling is just one field of psychology, but there's industrial psychology, there's sports psychology, there's so many other fields. So
Right.
depending on what field they've studied, they are a psychologist in that field.
Right.
A psychotherapist is someone who has studied counseling psychology,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even clinical, and who've been trained in certain psychotherapies. So
Right.
psychotherapies are therapies like, CBT is something that I think we
Right.
all commonly know. CBT or so many DBT, person centered. There are a
Right.
lot of psychotherapies. So they are more skilled in a sense of helping you work through difficult situations.
Okay.
They would be someone who would be teaching you tools and techniques. Uh, who would, if they also have a degree in psychology, like I said, they will be able to kind of find out when there is a disorder and how to help with that, whom to refer. So all of this gets taken care.
Right. I think a lot of points there that you touched upon that we can actually, delve into a deeper conversation into. But one thing that I would like you to kind of help us understand is, like you mentioned, there are different kinds of psychology that one can kind of study or try and understand, right? Like you brought up sports psychology, or, we were talking about food psychology a bit just before the conversation, and so on. So what are those different fields like? Because to a layman, the first thing that comes to your mind is either counseling and therapy, or the cliched mental hospital wala image. So could you talk to us a little bit about the different other fields that are available?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there is, clinical psychology where we work with mental disorders. Counseling, we
Right.
already know. There is organizational industrial psychology where you can become a HR, right? Or they're working on industrial development.
Right.
It could be in training, coaching, or in the HR field. There's sports psychology where someone would be looking at performance, right? And how to improve a sports person's performance and those aspects.
Okay.
Then there is forensic psychology, criminal psychology, where you work with the police, where you look at how to do the right kind of investigations, maybe, right? How to interview suspects. So these are some aspects. Yeah. So I think predominantly this is what is commonly seen, but I'm sure there's a lot consumer psychology looking at how to market and how consumers buy product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just endless, right? Because everything that you can kind of put your head into, you can actually put your head into that, right? So it's essentially that. So yeah, like you said, it's just endless. Another point that you did bring up though, and which is very important, is when you kind of brought up the point of saying, when do you identify, I can go to a counselor, maybe that's all that I need, or do I need to go to, a psychiatrist or anyone else of a higher, because I feel like I need a someone of a little more, experience or whatever. How do you distinguish as an individual, in the sense, if I'm so if so for example, especially because I'm talking also with respect to the generation gaps that exist. So let's say 10-15 years ago, when we talk about somebody having a small breakdown, or let's say an anxiety attack or something of that sort, they might have just brushed it under the carpet saying, this is life. But today we're at a point where we kind of, at least some people have the awareness to say that, what, this doesn't seem right. Maybe this is something that I need to talk to someone about or consult someone about, right? So how do we identify, in a sense, the scales of the things that we feel? I know it's a very kind of naive and also a little difficult question to ask, but you know what I'm asking and what space I'm coming from. So if you could answer that for me as well.
Yeah. So I think, so Shruti, I think it depends on the severity of what you're going through. Right. If, let's say, for the last 1 month or last 2 weeks, you've simply not even been able to get out of your bed, and you just find yourself not going to work, feeling low, thinking a lot about suicide, right? So what I'm saying is that these are depressive symptoms, yes, but these are also very severe, where you're not able to go about your day-to-day functioning also. Yeah. Or if you experience something unusual, right? So maybe feeling things which are true that other people around you might sort of not agree with, right? Or hearing certain things, seeing certain things which might not be correlating with other people's experiences.
Correct.
Or there is intense panic to an extent where you're just feeling anxious the whole day. You're not able to focus, concentrate. You're feeling like you might be having a heart attack because the palpitations are so strong.
Right. Yep.
So if your severity is so strong, then please go to a psychiatrist immediately.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you're doing relatively all right and you're able to cope, but you have a feeling that something's not okay, then you should go to a counseling or a clinical psychologist.
Okay.
And after the first few sessions, they would be doing an assessment. And if they feel that what you're doing requires a psychiatric support and medication is required, then they will be referring you.
Right.
But if you're confused, then just go to a counselor, as in a counseling psychologist or a clinical psychologist, because they will know how to identify a disorder, and if required, they'll do the right reference for you.
Right. So I think we kind of skipped one whole step here. We kind of jumped and we said that we have reached the point where we kind of go to the counselor or the therapist. The bigger gap in between is a lot of people don't want to go to the therapist or go to see a counselor or any kind of mental health professional, right? Why do you think that this gap existed? I kind of brought up the same point as well, because if you see, our generations before us, they've for them these are not like problems per se, maybe because that's how they have been told, and kind of they have lived their life that way. So as people of this generation, when you kind of approach maybe the people in your family, seeking out for help, they might tell you that, what, it's just normal life, just go on with it, right? How do you kind of bridge this gap, and why where did we go wrong in kind of not addressing this at a very at a much earlier point? You can also perhaps draw some parallels from what's happening around the world, right? Because if that can kind of help us gauge some understanding of why we're kind of one step back and we haven't even reached the point where we can openly talk about going to a counselor, right? Of course, the conversations are changing and we are optimistic, but I'm saying we're still not where we should be. So why, if you could kind of, I'm just pondering, so if you can kind of help me with that.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. And, something that strikes me as you're talking about the previous generation and this generation is that I feel, quite wonderfully, people of the older generation, let's say 50 plus, I'm seeing that they're much more open to counseling now,
Mm-hmm.
because almost on a monthly basis, I think I get approached by at least a few of them, right, who are
Okay.
in the above 50 age group, who are willing to consider counseling and who are willing to recognize that mental health is also a need that needs to be addressed.
Right.
um, yeah, so which is good, but I think also why this hasn't happened for the longest time, I'm sure if we get down to exploring it, there are just so many reasons that would
Right.
come to it. But I'm just reminded of this, at this point, I think I'm just reminded of this, what do I say, this Maslow's hierarchy. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
So
so I
hierarchy
think
of needs. Yep.
hierarchy of needs, right? So I think
Yeah.
looking at us as a nation and how we were all this while, I think we were still looking at the basic needs to be met, right? Because
Right.
being a developing nation, and also I think the previous generation was the generation that sort of really worked hard towards building a
Correct.
sense of
Yeah.
security. And that time it was more important that there is financial stability, and then there's a house, and then basic educations are taken care of.
Yeah.
And thankfully that need was met, and I think it's our generation which is sort of getting to reap the rewards of that, in a sense of
Correct.
having this access to extra income maybe, or extra resources that will allow us to take care of mental health and consider that as a separate need as well.
Correct.
uh, yeah, so I think that's one of the things that could be bringing in the change.
Right.
But I think, yeah, this is it's going, it seems to be going in the right direction, so which is
Correct.
just so
I
good.
think that kind of puts a lot of things in perspective. And I'm hoping that conversations like this will also help the generation that's going to follow us, right? So then we are kind of setting a foundation for them, and maybe, it will no longer be a stigma or that difficult to have these conversations. Which brings me to the next point. Let's say that, okay, I've gone through all of this. Let's say I've decided to, go consult a counselor. I've identified one counselor through whatever process, right? If you could also talk a little bit about, how do you go about the process of identifying someone, and then talk about what does a typical counseling session entail without giving away your trade secrets to us. But just to kind of tell us, what is it like? I mean, because I'm sure, because I kind of, the first time I stepped out, I had my own, reservations about it. I was a little skeptical about it myself. But then it's an experience in itself. So if you can talk to us about that, perhaps.
Sure. So, yes, I think the most important thing in identifying a counselor is to feel like you need to click with the person, right? So, you need
Right.
to like the person. It needs
Right.
to feel like this person is someone with whom you can have a conversation, with whom you feel you can trust that person.
Right.
Uh, so the personality of the therapist, right,
Correct.
and how well it's gelling with your own personality is most important. And I would suggest that if that is not fitting, then you should not proceed with your counselor.
Okay.
So in terms of qualifications, I think it's good if you can look for someone with at least a master's degree in counseling.
Correct.
Yeah, and someone with a certain amount of experience in maybe the kind of issues that you're looking to
Okay.
deal with. I think today, considering that so much is online, it's very, you'll find a lot of reviews about therapy sessions in most counselors' profiles. So you could go through that. You could look at other people's experiences,
Right.
look at the positive as well as the negative, so that you know sort of what to
Right.
expect. And a lot of therapists today are also on Instagram. So I think a peak of their own personality sort of comes out there.
Correct.
So you could consider these factors. And I would say you try out a therapist for about 3 sessions at least.
Okay.
And after that, if it's still not feeling right, then maybe you should consider changing.
Correct. Okay.
But maybe not at the right, just after 1 session or just after 2 sessions, because sometimes it sort of takes time to, really get a feel of what therapy is like.
Got it. Makes sense. I think it's just a practical way to kind of go about it. And what about the point of beyond that point? What's a typical counseling session like? I know there's a progression, and and it depends on the person. But if you could just give us a generic understanding of what a counseling session is like.
Sure. So I think counseling sessions, the first session is going to be a little bit different because you're meeting your therapist for the first time.
Right.
So generally, typically a session is between 50 minutes to 1 hour's time, depending on the therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 50 minutes because sometimes people like to keep that extra 10 minutes to also complete their documentation or session related work. So
Okay.
it's 50 minutes or 60 minutes.
Okay.
And so the first session would involve you meeting your therapist. Yeah, so sometimes before starting the session you might be given a form that sort of has where you're required to put in your details as to what are certain symptoms that you might be experiencing, or what is the reason that you've come here, like an intake sheet, and that sort of gives your therapist a heads up. But when you go to the session, I think generally building some rapport. So the initial bit would be about some sort of getting to know you. The therapist would also be doing something called as a contracting, where we let the client know as to what to expect from therapy, right? What therapy is, what therapy is not, what is the duration of the session, and certain other logistical issues like what happens if you cancel, how are we accessible in between sessions, confidentiality terms, what are the aspects in which we would be breaking confidentiality, right? So we would be letting them know all of this, and once the client is okay with these terms and conditions, then there would also be a signature which is taken. And yes, so once this is sort of out of the way, then we look at what's the reason they've come here, what kind of support they need from us. So talking about that, talking about what are certain goals or expectations they have from therapy. So if they're looking at continuing therapy for a longer duration, then we set the goals. Yeah, so I think this sort of is mostly it: building the rapport, contracting, understanding why they're here, and setting the goals. And ongoingly, the first few sessions would be sort of an informal assessment where we are sort of collecting data about the client's life, trying to formulate what could be the reason why they're facing the challenges that they're facing. So subsequent sessions would be explorations around this so that we can help them meet their therapy goals, along with discussing whatever has come up for them between the sessions, right? So if there's something that's new or recent that they're dealing with that they want to talk about in the session, then of course there's space for that.
Correct. I think makes sense. That kind of tells us, what the equation will be like. It kind of sets ground for that. It also kind of breaks down the different process. So I think that's quite interesting to know. While you were talking, what actually came to my head is, so I'm sure a lot of people when they come, and I know you, and you imagine this for like multiple people. So you do counseling with multiple people at a time, right? So it's almost a lot of people when they come for counseling, it's almost like all the baggage that they're carrying, if not as a whole, into pieces, they kind of break it and they put it on you, right? So what is that like as a counselor? I'm just curious to understand, as a counselor, to kind of take that on, and how does that kind of affect you? And I'm leading on to the question where I want to understand if you could tell us how important it is as a counselor also to perhaps seek counseling, which is also something that we should talk about, and if you could tell us about that. And despite that, I'm sure you have your own satisfaction that you get when you finish this. So if you could talk to us about the twofold aspect of this, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think yes, because through the sessions we are sort of taking in a lot of the emotional load of our clients, and that's why I think it's important for counselors to have very good self-care practices. Otherwise, it can sort of the burnout, the risk for burnout otherwise is going to be very high, because I think we're constantly sort of holding space for other people, where we are giving so much of focused attention, listening, empathy, that at a surface level it just looks like this person might just be not talking and just nodding their head and giving a smile, but it's really so much goes on.
Okay, I think I'm losing you.
Are you there?
Okay, Chaitra, I'm losing you.
Okay, I can't see you, Shruti. Can you hear me? Hello, Shruti, are you there?
Sorry, my bad. I lost you there in the middle. So sorry.
No problem. Can
Yes,
you hear me now?
yes, I can hear you now. I'm so sorry about that. Yes, you were
Yeah.
talking about how essentially people come to kind of take their load off, and you were talking about burnout. Yes,
Yes. So yeah, so I was saying that for therapists, I think it's important that we have some form of self-care going on, so
right,
that we're able to sort of hold space for people, uh,
right,
in for their emotions that way.
right.
So I think different therapists do it in different ways, as in limiting the number of sessions, right,
Okay,
having gaps between the sessions,
okay,
right, and then there are of course certain professional boundaries. So all of this sort of help us do that.
right.
um, yeah. So I think there was another part to your question which I
Yeah, I had also asked. So, isn't it also important, in a sense, for counselors to seek counseling? And of course, the bit about, at the end of the day, what is the satisfaction that you take, and you still continue to do what you do despite of, the way it kind of hampers you as well, right? So, if you can talk to us about those two sides. So, yeah, the second bit is what you were talking about.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think therapy is for everyone. So we're no different. As humans, we have our own set of problems. I think a
Right,
lot of times there is this myth that therapists are perfect people, or they just know perfectly how to handle their emotions, or they have no
right,
problems in their own lives.
yeah,
It's all absolutely false.
right,
Yeah, so it is important that we go to therapy, because one is, like you said, we are taking in so much of other people's emotions ourselves.
right,
And because at a very human level it also ends up affecting you, because even though it might be a professional space, uh, vicariously, because also there's this concept interestingly as vicarious trauma, where just hearing about another person's trauma
right,
can traumatize another person.
correct,
So as therapists we are always at a risk for that,
right,
because we're constantly absorbing that. So we need a space where we can sort of let go of all of this and empty our cup once again.
yeah,
And of course, if there's something going on in our personal lives as well which I could be struggling with, taking help with that from another therapist.
right.
And this is also very important, because what can happen is that if I am struggling with something and then I get a client who's struggling with exactly the
Exactly
same
the same
thing,
thing. Yeah. And your own
it
biases and things like that come in the way. Yeah.
yes, yes, it's just natural that my own biases, I will lose my sense of objectivity in that moment, and I might end up uh, doing something that might not be to the client's benefit.
Correct.
So it's important that I go and sort of clear my own mind so that
Right.
this doesn't happen.
I think my key takeaway here is that my therapist should be going to a therapist so that, her or his problems do not come in my problem. I mean, in the way of my problems. I think that's my key takeaway from today. But moving on, another myth in a sense that I kind of recently heard from someone in my own family was that, okay, assuming, okay, I have identified a therapist, my family is okay with me going to a therapist, for example, I go to the therapist, then what about this whole myth about the tendency of kind of relying on a therapist, right? There's that whole conversation that's going on as well. What would you, I mean, what do you as a counselor have to say about that? And not to sound too pompish or pompous, but what would you say is a good sign of a good therapist? If you could help us understand this, because really I'm trying to understand this.
Mm-hmm. So when you say relying on a therapist, are you referring to a sense of dependency?
Right, in the sense that there's this whole conversation going on about, there, if you go to a therapist, there's this whole dependency that you kind of feel towards the therapist, which is not the case. But this whole conversation, if you could help us bust this myth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite yeah, it's a concern, I think, but I would
Yeah.
like to say that it's absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But if that is happening, I'm not saying this doesn't happen, it could happen, but if it's happening, then you need to bring it up with your therapist, or you need to change your therapist, right?
Okay.
So it's like this saying that is there, like, so, you know, it's don't give someone fish, but teach them how to fish.
Right.
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 So I think
Yeah.
therapy is a lot like that, where you're teaching people how to
Correct.
fish. So you can sort of know that you're getting dependent on a therapist if you see signs like, let's say, every time you're feeling low, you're feeling anxious, you absolutely can't refuse that by yourself till you go and talk to your
Correct.
therapist, right? So you just need that person to sort of reassure you and to calm you down. Or if you find your therapist someone with whom you're constantly sort of required to solve problems for you, who's giving you direct advice, or who's telling you
Right.
what to do, and unless you're getting that solution from them, you're not able to think
Correct.
for yourself and
Yeah.
figure things out. So these are definitely some unhealthy signs,
Right.
and if this is happening, then yes, it's a red flag.
Right.
Uh, this might happen once in a while, like out of 15 times or 20 times, once or twice you take your therapist's help to do certain things, it's okay. But if it's happening every single time consistently,
Right.
then yes, it's a problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And any kind of tips you can give us on the sign of a good therapist, if there is one. I mean, if there is a, I don't know, a secret book hidden somewhere that we don't know about.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of signs. One is, like I said, it's important that you feel that you're able to click with that person, right?
Right.
And I think that comes when your therapist is sort of building that trust with you,
Right.
right? Yeah, so
Right.
you find the person to be genuine,
Right.
someone who's not pretending to be the expert of your life, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Uh, someone who's willing to look at your strengths, someone who acknowledges all the goodness in you,
Right.
someone who's transparent, right? So you
Right.
should feel like a real person is sitting in front of you, not like some personality, or, you know,
Correct.
someone who's very opaque.
Correct.
Yeah, someone who's well qualified. Like I
Right.
said, you know, they need to be educated, they need to be knowledgeable. That is important. So I think it's a combination of who the person is, the therapist being someone who, like I said, is genuine, someone who
Right.
has the skill set. So, you
Right.
know, because counseling is also a lot of about the skills. So the way that they're talking to you, the way, you know, we are maybe confronting a client, or the
Right.
way that we point out discrepancy, all these are skill sets, and it needs to happen in a way that is gentle, that is sort of pointing out the difficult things while still saying that, you know,
It's okay.
it's okay, you know,
Yeah.
you're okay, but this is something that I notice about you,
Right.
right? So having
Yeah.
the right personality, right skill set, and the right knowledge base is important. So if you find that combination, and if you're feeling like it's right, then it's right.
Right. I think, like a lot of things in life, it's about being intuitive about how you feel about the person, the process, and a lot of things. So yeah, I think that kind of puts again things into perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think another important thing is you'll see changes, right?
right.
So if you're in therapy and nothing is changing after 15, 20, 30 sessions, then maybe something.
I think, yeah, those are some really good pointers that we can all use. Something else that you did bring up, and something else that I would like to talk about is, of course, so these are direct methods of, seeking help. But what about someone who wants to stay informed and want, just by the cure, just as human beings, want to understand, and maybe also if there are people, who we know, we kind of who are going through things like this. How in this whole social media and this age where there's so much information going on, it's kind of easy to lose track of what is relevant information, what's not, what's the right resources, where do I look up, reliable information, content, etc., etc. If you could kind of help us out in guiding and navigating through, what are the channels of reliable information content, whether it's in the form of books or, tests that are available online, right? Where you can take up certain tests to kind of find out if you are, suffering from something or not, or just, general tests that are available to kind of understand your own mental aptitude and, where you are in terms of a mental space. If you could, if you as someone in the field could, tell us some of the places that we can, say that, these are reliable, we can stick to these for information. So I mean, we're open to anything. So it could be books, it could be, maybe links to certain websites, or just people who are putting out good content. Anything that you can think of?
Yes, I think this organization called White Swan
Okay,
Foundation, I
right,
think
great.
they're doing really good work in mental health. So I think if you're looking for reliable information about mental health in India, they're a good place to start.
Okay,
Other than that, I think we need to look up for established organizations, right? So especially in times like this, when we're looking for, like a COVID situation where we're looking for official information on how to take care of mental health and stuff.
right,
So in these situations, then please look out for organizations like, let's say, NIMHANS, right, or WHO, which all have a mental health section in it. Even WHO does, right?
right,
And there are tips to sort of help you take care. Other than that, there are plenty of books. There are just plenty of amazing books on mental health. So one thing that strikes me is about depression is
mhm,
and anxiety is book by David Burns,
mhm.
this famous book called Feeling Good, which is
Okay,
about CBT.
okay,
That is something that's useful, and there is an assessment for depression inside that. So if someone is sort of interested, they could do that.
okay,
um, but I think looking for books written by psychologists, looking for books
right,
written by someone with a degree in psychology might be more reliable.
right.
So yeah, there are plenty on Amazon. So if you just Google on the topic of your interest, just look at the author
Right.
qualification and it should be good.
Right, that sounds good. I think something very great that you did bring up is that today we are living in very uncertain and unprecedented times, right? So nobody knows, and there's so much uncertainty going around. Um, and a lot of people are not with their family. A lot of people are, by themselves, and a lot of things that are going around. So these are times that could kind of, bring people to kind of start self-assessing, perhaps have their mind wander in ways that it shouldn't. And with the recent noise that's been going around, suicide, with the events that have unfolded recently, if you could talk to us a little bit, again, I know this is a very vast topic, but if you could talk to us a little bit about how this pandemic has um, kind of got us all reassessing who we are, and where we are, in terms of whether it's professional, personal, whatever, and how that's kind of impacting our mental health, and in general, to understand how does one kind of try and stay away from negative thoughts per se. And if you could also throw some light on suicide prevention, and how we can um, kind of identify red flags, from the get-go, perhaps. I'm sorry, that's too many things, but I think it's just too many important things that we need to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. I think we are unfortunately at a pace, I think, which none of us really anticipated.
Right.
And it's the first time for all of us being in a situation like this.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone knows as to what's the right way or the perfect way to handle this.
Right.
So I think firstly, it's important that we acknowledge that it's all right that the current normal is not like how it was before, right? So
Right.
right now there is slightly more anxiety, there's higher lower moods, right? There's so much of uncertainty, and this is more of a universal experience, so
Right.
everybody is going through the same thing. And I think it's important that we accept that firstly, because the
Right.
more I try to sort of push that away, then I'm just going to make that bigger, right?
Right.
Because then I'm going to say I should not be anxious, so I'm going to feel anxious about my anxiety, and
Right.
that's going to just deepen this whole process even more.
Yeah.
So I think firstly, this is also a real problem, right? COVID is a real situation, so taking care of the actual precautions that need to be taken care is
Yeah.
important, because that is going to make me feel safe,
Yeah.
and that is going to reduce my anxiety. So that is one. And something that I'm also noticing a lot in my sessions these days is about I think the fear of losing loved ones, because
Right.
things are so uncertain, because there's a pandemic, and also I think the recent suicide also sort of brought that up as to how could someone who looked so good and
Right.
so happy and so perfect take a step like that.
Right.
Right, so if people are experiencing I think anxiety about this, then like I said, firstly, do everything that is in your control that will keep you and your family members safe, right?
Right.
Because then you're actually tackling the problem,
Right.
right? And secondly, I think with suicide prevention, it's important for us to sort of just keep our eyes open. You know, a lot of times we're so used to probably living with a person that we don't notice things about them or changes in them, because we are sort of might be lost in our own minds, in our own lives as well.
Right.
So simple things might can suggest that a person is at a higher risk of suicide. So for example, someone with a mental disorder like depression especially
Right.
is at a higher risk. Not that everybody who's depressed is suicidal, but it
Right.
comes with a higher risk, right?
Right.
Someone who might have had a particular loss. I think also with COVID now, the people experiencing financial losses or changes in their careers, right?
Right.
These things are higher. So
Right.
if someone who's gone through a loss specifically, someone who might not have connections, right? Like family or friends with whom they feel connected enough, or feeling lonely,
Right.
they could be at a higher risk, right? Someone who you find themselves to be withdrawing, who's sort of not showing any interest in the day-to-day activities. They might be let's say giving away their possessions or being reckless about their own lives as though they don't care about it anymore,
Right.
right? So these could be some of the signs. And if someone does notice these signs, then please ask the person about it. You know, a lot of times there is this misconception that if I talk to people about suicide, then I'm putting the idea in their head.
Mm.
uh, which is not true. I think if you talk to somebody gently, they will talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, because suicide is not an unknown concept that we need to introduce it to somebody. Everybody knows what it is.
Right.
And me not talking about it, me acting like it's a taboo, just makes it harder for the person to talk about it. So even though they might want to talk about it, they are feeling awkward, so they will not talk about it. So
Right.
it's just better to break the ice and
Yeah.
talk about it in gentle ways.
Yeah.
So if you notice, then don't maintain confidentiality. Talk to them. If there is a reason for concern, get professional help, inform close family members so that someone can keep an eye on them.
Right. I think with respect to suicide, another thing that does come to mind is that there's this notion that when you find a reason that could be, the reason that something like this could have happened, more often than not, it's just not one reason, right? It could be a culmination of hundreds and thousands of things that's kind of led up to that one particular decision that he or she takes, right? Could you kind of help us understand that as well? Because I think that's an important conversation as well.
Yeah, that's so true. You know, suicide is rarely a impulsive act.
Right.
It is impulsive. I'm not saying it is not, because people who have, let's say, anger issues or impulse control issues might, in a spur of a moment, do something that might end up in that,
Right.
right? But most of the cases, it's something that people deliberate over, think over a lot. So in that course of time, there is a lot of clues that will be left behind, right?
Right.
They might be previous suicide attempts, they might be
Yeah.
suicide attempts that have failed in the past, right? There might be a history of self-harm. They might be thinking about planning it but not going ahead with it.
Right.
So it really happens over a period of time,
Yeah.
and unfortunately something might be a trigger when they start considering that more seriously.
Right.
So when they come to therapy sessions, we sort of talk to them in detail about it. If we feel like this could be a possibility, then it is explored. We do a risk assessment, in a sense of assessing the risk as to, even if this person is thinking about suicide, how likely are they to actually end up doing the act.
Right.
Yeah, so depending on the severity, if it's something that we feel is a high risk, then we inform the family members and we breach confidentiality.
Right.
Right, but gatekeepers to suicide training is something that is available widely. There are a lot
Okay.
of companies and organizations that is doing that, and I would suggest that everybody does this training. Just so that as a layman, I don't have to be an expert to identify these signs, but I can learn and I can keep my eyes open, right?
Right.
So especially in a crisis time like this, I think we just sort of need to have each other's back. So this is a
Right.
good way to do that.
Right. I think as humans, that's the only advantage we have, right? Like we're here for each other, and if that's one thing that we're unable to do, then it's a sad state and also time to live in. But yeah, I think we're all optimistic. I think one important aspect when we kind of talk about any important topic, right, whether it's mental health or any topic, is to kind of also identify how the different media, right? So whether it's print media, whether it's your film and television, or whether it's things like whatever, like, newspapers, magazines, radio, like all these different media that's available out there, the way they kind of tackle and address these issues, right? And over the years, we've had a lot of events, a lot of movies, a lot of publications, a lot of things that have happened around the mental health space. So, would you say that, I mean, whether negative or positive, but would you say that the general heightened awareness kind of helps, or do you think that now the negative conversations, or the let's say misinterpreted or misinformed information that's available out there is kind of taking away from the right information that's available? And what is your take on that? How media can kind of tackle you know these kind of conversations?
Hmm. I think where we are is definitely better than a place before where there was no conversations around
Right,
this.
right,
But I do agree with you that a lot of times the way certain news and all of this is covered is more sensational than in a right way of
right,
really covering those aspects.
right,
So I think it's important that we are aware as to which we are consciously choosing, rather, which media we are consuming about
right,
mental health, so that we are getting the right kind of information and we are getting access to the right resources. So I think one risk that I do see is that I see that a lot of, with Instagram especially, a lot of people in a sense of wanting to be influencers might just have like a very basic degree, but might be sort of giving out a lot of
correct.
advice about mental health, a lot of
Yeah,
times, which is sort of maybe not appropriate.
yeah,
So I would say that, please again look for qualifications before you start following someone or before you take their advice. And I think common sense sort of plays a big role. So it needs to sort of make sense. What the person is needs to make sense. And
right.
always look for official information.
Right. Makes sense. And I think also with the kind of conversations that's happening on the larger scale, right? On the print media, on television, on the films that are kind of coming out, and even if it's just small snippets, but the thought that there's conversation happening on mental health is kind of optimistic. And to be honest, I'd just like to go on and on with this conversation, and I just have a lot of things to ask, but unfortunately, we don't have the time. I'm just going to ask one last thing to kind of sum up the entire thing is, again, like I said, we're all in uncertain, unprecedented times. What have you done to sorry, what have you done to kind of stay positive and optimistic during these times? Any simple practices or habits that you can kind of give us an insight into?
Um, I think simple things might make a difference right now.
Right,
Stay connected. I think it's very unfortunate that we're not able to sort of meet the people that we love or give them that hug, right, or
right,
socialize that way.
right,
So find other ways of doing that, and it could be through video calls, it could be through phones, or it could even be not even with people, like, sometimes a pet or a plant,
right,
simple things like this
right,
make you feel connected as well.
right,
Um, that and you could also sort of, I think, reframe the way that we're thinking about this, in a way of also looking at it as an opportunity that is giving you maybe a chance to pick up on projects that you probably did not have time before if you were traveling and working for long hours and things like
yeah,
that. So this could be one ways of doing that.
right.
Yeah, gratitude and staying safe. Yeah.
Yes. I think you've summed up the entire conversation in those two words, in those last few lines. Last but definitely not the least, how is the way in which one can get in touch with you, perhaps to kind of seek help or just for information, or maybe even to kind of intern with you or anything of that sort, if that's an option? How do we get in touch with you?
Yes, so you can email me at
Okay.
chaitra.m@untangle.co.in.
Okay.
So my details are available on my website, untangle.co.in. So you can get in touch with the number that's mentioned there, or even email the ID hello@untangle.in mentioned there.
We'll do
And
that. We will mention this at the bottom of the video when we put out the video. Guys, you'll
yes,
be able to access that. Yeah.
that would be great. So I'm looking out for interns. I'm looking out, for even psychologists who would like to sort of collaborate with me. So if there's any professionals or students out there who's interested, then they're more welcome. And yeah, anyone seeking an appointment can find the details on the website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chaitra. I think that kind of brings us to the end of end of this conversation. Like I said, I really wish we had more time to kind of talk about a lot of the other things that we can touch upon. But thank you so much. Thank you for giving us some time and kind of giving us insight into how, mental health professional works and what are the things we can follow as an individual to stay in a better space mentally and kind of also combating times that we are in today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chaitra. I'm just hoping that everybody who tuned in, apart from me here, kind of had something to take away today. And I would like to remind everyone else that this is part of Dialogues That Matter, a series that we started where we talk to different people, change makers, people who are doing stellar work in their own field. Example today was Chaitra, who's a counselor and psychotherapist. Thank you so much, guys. We have another more sessions coming up this month. Again, we will be talking about mental health. We'll put details of how you can get in touch with Chaitra or Untangle. Once again, thank you so much, Chaitra, and hopefully next time we can have this conversation face to face yeah, at Dialogues.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me today, Shruti. It was really a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Chaitra. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.